In this video, I'd like to look at Excel and nested ifs. So I want to ask multiple questions, not just a simple if asks one true false question or one logical test, and I would like to ask two. So I have some data. The data can be found, the Excel spreadsheet that I'm going to start with can be found at this location if you're interested. And I have some substances and I have their melting and boiling points. I'd like to figure out their state for room temperature. I'm going to take room temperature to be 67. Okay, let's just get the logic straight before we try to start coding it in Excel. So that if the room temperature, the temperature of the room is less than the melting point, then the subject hasn't melted and we should say that it's a solid. So that's, so if the melting point is less than the boiling point, and if the room temperature is less than the melting point, solid. Let's go to the other extreme. If the room temperature is higher than the boiling point, then it has boiled and it's a gas. So, and then the middle is if the room temperature falls between the melting point and the boiling point, that's when we have a liquid. And okay, and then I'm going to say for my first step that if I'm not a solid, I can call it a fluid. So there's a category fluid that sort of captures both solid and, or sorry, fluid. It contains both liquid and gas. Okay, so now let's try to do Excel. And let's first do the sort of solid, not solid, or solid fluid part first with a simple if, so a simple logical test, one condition. And that will be if, and what did we say? We're comparing the room temperature to the melting point. So, and I'm going to take 67, and if it is less than the melting point, then we're going to say that it hasn't melted, and I just want the word, so I put that in quotes. It's a literal string, fancy computer science terms, and otherwise, so if it's true, if 67, which I'm taking to be room temperature, is less than the melting point, then it has not melted, and we're going to call it a solid. Otherwise, let's for now say fluid. And alpha alcohol is a fluid, copy the formula down. Bismuth was a solid, bromine was a fluid, copper was solid, gallium solid, gold solid, lead solid, mercury fluid, neon fluid, nitrogen, oxygen fluid, so phosphorus is solids. Okay, so it seems to make some sense. Now let's try to go ask the follow-up question. So I'm going to, I think I'll just leave that. I'm going to copy the formula over and then, but I'm going to go back to B2. So this is, and just copy it down. So I just repeated what I already had. So when I copied over the formula, the B turned into a C, but then I edited the formula, turned it back into a B. If I had been smart in the beginning, I would have said $B, but here we go. Okay, now I would like to, the solid is good. Solid is solid. You know what state it's in. It's the fluid, which is our problem. And then, so now I want to replace fluid with another if, with a nested if, with an if inside an if, and then break it up into, and get the next, get that breakdown between fluid to solid or gas. So now I can ask, I know that the room temperature is not less than the melting point because I'm in the false part of my first if. So I can either ask for the melting point. Sorry, now I've asked about the melting point and I know that that's false. So I can ask now about the room temperature being less than the boiling point, and that should be a liquid. Or I can ask the reverse question. So let me just go in order. So this part is done. The melting point, we know the melting point is less than room temperature because of the structure of our first if. So I don't need to ask that question again. I've asked the question about the melting point and room temperature. Now I'm ready to ask the next question. Is it less, is the room temperature 67 less than the boiling point? So I'm going to replace fluid with if and parentheses, and I need the three things. And I need to know this time if 67 is less than the boiling point this time. And if that's true, I think I'm saying it's a liquid. And otherwise, I'm saying it's a gas. And that was me here. That this part, that the room temperature being greater than the melting point was already established by where I am. I'm nesting this if in the original if, and I'm nesting it in the false part of the condition. So I know that my condition was false. So that first part is done. So I'm asking the second question, but in addition, is the room temperature less than the boiling point? Then I should have a liquid, otherwise a gas. So now I have ethyl alcohol is a liquid, bismuth a solid, bromine a liquid, copper solid, gallium solid, mercury a liquid, neon, nitrogen, oxygen, gas, gas, gas. Okay. So I have what I want. So I know the full-on state between the three states. So to figure out between two things, solid and liquid, I had to ask one question. But to figure out between three things, I had to ask two questions. And one way to ask the two questions is to nest them, to have one question inside the other. Okay. I want to, so in my first question, I asked between solid and fluid, and I could have replaced the word fluid with not solid. And here with the solid, liquid, and gas, I had to ask two questions. I asked my two questions in a nested format, one if inside the other if. I did not, each if has three things: a question, what to do if it's true, what to do if it's false. But what to do, in this case, what to do if it's false is to ask another question. So like if you were in a programming language, this would be like else if. If it wasn't true, then ask another question. And then that in that inner if, that nested if, had the standard three parts: ask a question, what to do if it's true, what to do if it's false. I want to, just while I'm here and have the data where I can do it, I want to ask the question. The first question in column D was sort of, I could say solid or not solid. So I want to ask a similar question of liquid or not liquid, but liquid is complicated. I can ask a simple question to figure out if it's a gas. I can ask a simple question to figure out if it's a solid, but liquid is this weird in-between thing. But I can use a Boolean and to ask one, I'm asking one question, but I'm asking one complicated question about a liquid. So let me see if I can manage this. Okay, so I want to say equal. So let me just label these columns while I'm here. So this is fluid or solid or fluid. And by fluid, I could say that meant not solid. And let me format these cells and align them and wrap them. Okay, and maybe bold them or unbold them, bold them. And let's give me some borders here. Okay, and then this was, I'll call it full out state, which was solid, liquid, or gas. And now I'm going to try to attempt to do liquid or not. Okay, and this is going to require a Boolean and so I'm going to say if equals if, and now my condition is going to be sort of a combination of two conditions. So it's going to work as one condition when I'm done, but it's a certain combination of two conditions. And then I'm going to say liquid and hopefully or not. So is it liquid or is it not? Okay. So I want to, in Excel, you say the word, you have the AND function, and the AND function has two or more arguments, and the arguments are logical tests. And so what are my logical tests for to see if you're liquid? So if the melting point is less than room temperature, so let me ask that question. So if the melting point B2 is less than room temperature, which I'm taking B67, that's one condition. And then I have another condition, and that is room temperature being less than the boiling point. So then room temperature 67 being less than the boiling point, which is C2. Let's see this again. So I ask if, and then I have a condition, my logical test, and an if, but this is a logical test, which is a combination of two logical tests, and it's an and for an and to be true, then both logical conditions must be true. Both logical tests must come out to be a true. And I asked for the melting point to be less than 67 and 67 to be less than the boiling point. So that gives me that sort of betweenness, and that should be liquid or not. I have to ask to get between solid, liquid, and gas. To get three possibilities, I must ask two sort of full-blown questions and not just one complicated question. But I can do liquid or not liquid by having one question, but a very sophisticated ANDed question. And so here's ethyl alcohol was liquid, bromine was a liquid, mercury was a liquid, water was a liquid, but zinc was not, it was a solid, so it was not a liquid, and oxygen was not because it was a gas. So, but that is an and gives you, combines two conditions, two logical tests, two Booleans, two things that are true or false, and gives you a new thing that's true or false. And it gives you true only if the two components or the two arguments were true. So that's what I wanted to show you here. Just make things looking nice. Okay. So we asked a simple question, whether it was solid or fluid. So that was an if. Simple test, what to do if it's true, what to do if it's false. In E, we had nested if. So we asked our first question. We said what to do if it was true. In our what to do if it was false, we had a follow-up question. And then we said what to do if it was true, what to do if the follow-up question was true, what to do if the follow-up question was false. And then in our last column here, we just went for the middle thing. So was it a liquid or not? And that was more complicated than either gas or solid, but it could still be done with one combined condition. The and of is the melting point less than room temperature, and is room temperature less than the boiling point? Am I in between? And being in between two things is really a combination of, two conditions. And so that's what we've done here. Okay, that's what I wanted to play with and show you. Thanks for your attention.